I'm going to go outside of my usual content today and do a little history lesson for white women. It's particular. This is for white women who follow me. I mean, obviously anyone can watch, but I want to talk about something that I did not know, and therefore I want to tell other white women, especially in the United States who are voting, a little bit of our history and why, when I'm talking about like, please vote, especially if you're in a swing state, I'm usually talking mostly to white women because we're the ones we are the largest voting bloc in the United States. And we have a history of screwing everybody over, especially during election time. So I respect everybody's right to vote for whoever you want, I guess. And also depends on what state you're in and whether your vote's even counted or not. And also you should absolutely be paying attention to all the propositions and all the local stuff, super important stuff. But as somebody who has a history degree and spent my final year, a whole year writing about women's suffrage, and it started off, I was like, I don't know, what was my thesis was supposed to be just like the women's suffrage movement, and it quickly turned into white supremacy within the women's suffrage movement. I had to completely change my thesis because it became, I already knew some of this, but I had no idea how big it was and why it took like 100 years or whatever. Is because of us. It was because of us. And it's also like, and there's an amazing article in the New York Times that came out just this weekend that I'm going to read today. And I'm also going to bring in some other things too. But the reason, like, I have been looking through all of my stuff for weeks trying to find my thesis, because I had all the points I want and I can't find it, y'all. So I was just like, all right, I guess I'll just like wing it. And then this article came out and it makes so many of the points that I wanted to make. And then some that I didn't even know. Like, I learned something new every day. And one of the reasons why it's so important is because not knowing our history is why we are holding everyone back. I grew up in the South, but I went to college in Montana. And in Montana, I literally had to unlearn everything I'd learned. I know that I've actually heard in other states this was what was taught too, but it was states' rights, states' rights, states' rights, and all this crap. And then like lynching and all the, like, some of the most defining moments in our history in terms of just how awful and terrorizing and violent. Just passed right over that because it's just all about how like amazing like white people are, especially like rich white men. And then I learned that the Daughters of Confederacy, the white women, like basically like the OG Karens, are the ones who like pushed the schools to get these textbook whitewashing of history. And that's happening right now with like, what's it called? Moms for Liberty, whatever that stupid group of people are basically like, we don't want to, it hurts our feelings. If you did not know about this story, they are trying to not only change our history, public history, in schools. Like this lady right here is trying to change is literally trying to make it so that, like, in not just children, but everybody doesn't really learn about everybody being white people, especially, doesn't really learn about things that make us feel bad about ourselves. God forbid we confront our past. It's like anyone who goes to therapy knows first you have to look at your past before you understand your present, and then you can move forward. And it's like, well, you don't know our past. It's too disturbing. Well, y'all, I tell you all the time, men who will not deal with their past are going to take that out on you in a marriage. This is what we do collectively with racism too. So for instance, they want to take this out. The Japanese internment camp, they just want to like not mention that anymore as a big part of our history. They want to whitewash the most major things in like the civil rights movement. They don't really want to talk about this. They really don't want to talk about this. And they want to replace it with this. As if this is important at all. I mean, come on. And I know that most of us were taught that Susan B. Anthony, la queen. No. Like, she was an anti-abortion white supremacist who said she cut off her own arm before letting black people vote. Please. We were not taught true history. This was one of the first things I found out when I did this thesis that I spent a year on, was that a lot of the women who were really pushing for suffrage didn't want black women to vote. They didn't want any women, black, indigenous, or any women of color, but they really didn't want black women to vote, especially in the South. And so they sabotaged it all. And it like this like trickle down, like, well, like give us, we'll get the vote first, and then we'll give it to you later. We'll use up. When does that ever happen? It's like trickle down suffrage. So before I go into the article, this was the book. When I found this book, it changed my life. Right. Also, I follow them on Instagram. Such amazing posts. And I was like, look, I know that book. I like use this a lot for my thesis. It was like kind of embarrassing carrying this around because, people couldn't read the subtitle. The Racial Origins of Feminism in the United States. Well, this was written a while ago. So there have been so many books since then. But this was the first one that I was like, pfft. And then I just, of course, this one especially about like suffrage, sent me down the rabbit hole of really wanting to understand my history, my people's history, and to not repeat the same mistake of my ancestors. There's been other books since this. I mean, there's a ton of books on this, honestly. This is a crucial and long undertaking because I'm still learning stuff. I will probably learn something in the comments in this video where I have missed something or maybe even got it totally wrong. But one of the reasons why we are struggling so much is because white women, we have been putting proximity to power to men, white men specifically, and throwing everyone else under the bus to have a little bit of power. And at the end of the day, we really don't have it, y'all. Like, this is not good for us. And I know, like, it's like, oh, maybe, no, it's not good. It's not good for us. It's not good for anybody. I mean, yeah, if you want more money and power, great. But like, good, like feeling dead inside, I'd rather not. From history, we can learn that white feminists were more invested in privilege than equality, seeking the right to oppress others rather than imagining a more just world for everyone. And if I have time in this video, I will go into how also this is why the modern gender binary is rooted in all. This is why I don't allow TERF comments on my page, because all this is rooted in like bioessentialism, eugenics, and all of that comes down to racism. It always does. Now, the reason why I brought this up is because a lot of times the thing that stands in the way of men deconstructing patriarchy is not only like not wanting to give up power, but shame. They don't want to sit with the shame of facing their history and how they have been exploiting even the women that they love. They like it. I get it. It is a never-ending facing things that are like create a lot of shame, and makes you really have to face yourself and look at yourself, and also face your family and look at your family and what some of our family members, like grandma and grandpa were doing and what their parents were doing. Because believe me, I mean, I focused a lot on Southern history, Southern women's history, and especially in trying to understand how that plays into all of this. And I went home and like crying pretty heavily on a regular basis, really realizing A, I've been lied to about my history, B, holy crap, my people did this. My people are terrorists. My people have literally terrorized, unalived, like, it is not fun stuff to unpack. And yet, looking at it and dealing with it is also really liberating. And it gets me in touch with my humanity. Because being it's not only, white supremacy culture is not only dehumanizing to other people, it's dehumanizing to the oppressor. Okay, so if you don't believe me, I talk about codependency all the time and people pleasing. Just look at this, the 5 characteristics of white supremacy culture: perfectionism, sense of urgency, defensiveness, quality over quantity. worship of the written word, only one right way, paternalism, either or thinking, power hoarding, fear of open conflict. Y'all know I talk about this all the time, especially with like Southern white women. Individualism, I'm the only one. Progress is bigger, more, objectivity, and right to comfort. Now, why am I talking about that? Well, I mean, I kind of talk about this kind of stuff all the time. Individualism, either or, binary, all or nothing. Like, just, if you want a separate video, like, y'all, this video could literally be like 8 hours long. So I'm gonna try to not get too off topic, but, because otherwise I'm not even gonna get into the whole history degree part, or history lesson. This is not my history degree that I'm showing off, because I'm a comedian and a storyteller and a journalist. I'm not a historian. Like, that's not my job. But this is something I do know something about and wanted to share. And this article just pulled all of this together so beautifully, and I love this. I love it. So let's just get into it before my ADHD brain gets too distracted. Will white women vote? It's a question with a fraught history. And again, why am I focusing on white women? Because I understand, like, again, there's a lot of white women who follow me who are like, you're for genocide if you vote for Kamala. I'm like, no. White women have historically found a reason to vote the wrong way. I respect any other demographic, but white women, especially cishet white women, we have been centering men and our proximity to white men for so long that we tend to do the wrong thing. And if this isn't you, then okay, I'm not talking to you. You know what I mean? That's okay. When I say white women, I say us, because even though I may not do some of the things I'm talking about white women do, I don't want to be like, they do that, then I'm a good one, because that's the othering, and that's part of the whole problem. That's the not all men with white women. White and black women have joined together to power progressive causes, from abolition to civil rights, but it's a tenuous alliance. So this is by Nicole Hannah-Jones. I want to give this author, this writer, journalist, credit for such an amazing piece. With a closely contested election just days away, much attention is put on whether or not black men are willing to vote for a black woman. And I love she calls this out right away, because I have seen a lot of discourse about, are black men going to do the right thing? Well, actually, I'm not saying that there aren't black men who are not going to vote for Kamala. I'm sure there are. I'm sure. But at the end of the day, white women are the biggest voting bloc, and we have historically not voted the way we are supposed to. News networks devoted numerous segments to pundits raising the alarm about the ambivalence of some black men to Harris presidency. Harris, responding to the concern in the final stretch of the campaign, released her opportunity agenda for black men. By the way, in case I forget to say this later, I don't trust any politicians. No one should. We vote for the person we can push. We vote for the person that we are going to push and push and push. We're not just like, boom, vote. Okay, it's all good. That is not how anything gets done. So, I will vote. Or I did vote. I already voted in Florida, in a swing state, for Kamala. Like, it's not over. That's the beginning. That's the beginning of being like, okay, we have to hold all of our politicians accountable. Hey, right? Because look what Biden did. He did some stuff, but like, anyway, John Oliver did an amazing segment on this, saying, a white woman like myself cannot hide behind Palestine to say, I'm not voting for Kamala, to punish the Democrats. He not only has he said, finish the job. So, I mean, things are going to get worse for Palestine, not better. Under this dude, also told donors he will crush pro-Palestinian protests and deport demonstrators. This man actually does do a lot of the things he threatens to do. Also, these two dudes are going to retire. They're at retirement age. If he's elected, we could have 5 young douchebags in the Supreme Court. That means we are screwed for decades. He wants to put this dude in charge of the health. This dude doesn't even believe in a polio vaccine. Also, this dude, let me know if you want me to do a deep dive on this man. Talk about abuser. Have you looked up what this man did to his Why? It sucks. This two-party crap, this winner-takes-all crap, the electoral college. But like, we're never getting rid of the electoral college as long as Republicans are in charge. Like, I don't know if we'll ever get rid of it. Definitely not the people who believe in the same thing as the people who put that into place, giving these people in the middle of nowhere with smaller populations more voting power than cities with millions. Like, it's so messed up. I mean, most politicians, they can't be trusted. We have to hold their feet to the fire constantly. But, you know, they actually do respond. If there's enough pushback, they are forced to change, and it's slow. It's slow change. But I meant to mention this in my last video, but I remember 2000, and it all came down to a few votes, like a few hundred votes or something in Florida. It all came down to that. It all came down to that. And then, you know, the Republican Supreme Court, whatever, like, was like, no, we don't want to recount. Like, even like that election was stolen. But you know what could have changed that? If the local you know what I mean? Like, even if your vote doesn't count in the, like, this all matters. This all matters. So this like nihilistic, like, you know what? If any other group of women who've been working really hard for a long time for the rights of everybody, you know what? Fair. But white women, we don't have a right to do that. We do not have that. We do not have the right to do that. Individualism, put it aside. Put it aside. Because this framing of being so worried about black men voting, and again, I know that actually is a fear, and a legitimate one, but it's white women. If anyone throws this election, it's going to be white women. Like we threw 2016. This framing obscures a significant truth. Polling shows that a clear majority of black men, some 69%, according to an October 24 poll, support Harris. The only group supporting Harris at a higher rate than black men is black women at 81%. There is one group, however, that deserves more attention, as they could very well determine this election: white women. This is our moment. This is our moment. This is our moment to break the cycle of violence in terms of being the violent ones. Violence doesn't have to look like physical violence. Our violence looks different, just as dangerous. About 59 million voters, white women, constitute the nation's single largest voting bloc, and also its most divided. About 53% of white women voters identify as or lean Republican, compared to 43% who identify or lean Democrat. I mean, remember, that's why we were criticized so harshly after Hillary didn't win. That was our fault. I mean, we're not the only people that count, but that's on us. While a majority of American women have voted for a Democrat since 1996, white women have not. In fact, a majority of white women have cast their ballots for the Democratic running for president just once since 1968. And that one time was not for, I forgot about this part, was not for Hillary, but for Bill. We saw how that turned out. Monica Lewinsky. Black men, on the other hand, have already proved that they will vote for a woman for president. 2016, 8 out of 10 black men voted for Hillary Clinton in her historic run. The only two groups where a majority did not support Clinton were white men and white women. And this was after the Access Hollywood tapes. Now, some people are maybe don't remember that. Maybe you're younger. Literally, like this is before he was even convicted of like all rape and everything else. But this is when he was talking about like assaulting women. Like, I remember, I was in LA when this election happened, and I remember most of my liberal friends who were from like the East Coast or the West Coast, like, didn't think this man could win. And I felt crazy. I'm like, do you know America? I do. Like, how do you not think this man can win? Do you not understand? Who do you hang out with? Well, yeah. Like, I had been preparing mentally for that. I mean, I was hoping I'd be wrong. But, you know, Trump country is where I grew up. And I think a lot of white women, Trump just reminds them of their daddy or their husband. And they're like, yeah, why not? I'm used to, like, a narcissistic, insane man thinking that I'm not human. But whatever, I'll be Even though we were facing the possibility that new Supreme Court justices that Trump appointed could overturn Roe v. Wade, we knew that was possible. We still didn't do it. We still did. And then what happened? Just 45% of white women voted for Clinton compared to 98% of black women. Now, do you think that those 98% of black women liked Clinton? I mean, Hillary has said some of the most messed up stuff. She's done terrible things. Like, it's not weird to vote for someone you don't like or don't agree with. You vote for who you think is most likely you can push. It's not just like, oh, like they're amazing, like cool, vote and then we're done. That's not how it's ever been. And now polls say that 51% of white women say they will vote for Trump. Great, we learned a lot. 2% less, but still over half. Come on. If indeed she becomes the first woman to breach the 235-year unbroken line of men ascending to the highest office in the land, it may very well be because white women do something they have long struggled to do, align their interest with those of black women. We do not have a history of doing this, and that is why we are where we are. So then she goes into this amazing history lesson about history shows us that advances towards equal rights in this nation can come to pass when white women join black Americans to fight for a common cause. But the same history reveals how fragile that alliance can be. The two greatest movements for women's rights in this nation, the suffragist movement and the women's liberation movement, were each rooted in black freedom struggle. Each historic example demonstrates the transformative potential when white women act in solidarity, not with white men, as they also often do, but with black women. But each also demonstrates the fickleness of white women when it comes to that solidarity. The movement for women's rights was born of the abolition. So here's the lesson. This is an amazing history lesson that is not like a however long thesis. Like, I don't know why I was trying to whatever. I'm so glad this article came out because it's just, I am long-winded. Y'all know that. This video is already too long. Sorry. The movement for women's rights was born, okay, here we go. It was born of the abolitionist movement when black and white women began to contemplate their distinct rights. For white women who believed ending slavery was a moral and religious issue, participating in the abolitionist gatherings and activism gave them an early taste of political involvement and the ability to assert their own thoughts and beliefs in the public square. Most women at the time could not vote or hold public office. They were explicitly excluded from most college degrees and professions and often could not be a party to contracts or in many cases own property. Except this kind of property. If you are a white woman, especially in the United States, you want to understand our history and why we are not trusted and why we have so much work to do, please read this book. White Southern women couldn't have property in terms of didn't have access to money, but the property that they could have were humans. White women in the South were trying to keep slavery. We're just passive. Oh, we're victims of the system. No, because this was the only capital was humans. So again, we have a long history of choosing power, money, proximity to men over human rights of all women, especially black women. For black women who toiled under dual oppressions for being both black and female, the struggle for racial and gender equality could not be separated. Through abolition and the argument of natural rights that underpinned it, some white women also began to question the way white men discriminated against them. Again, some white women didn't even question stuff until they were like, well, let's see. This seems like a theme. Maybe my husband is my oppressor. It's a quote if you want to pause and read. 1837, at the first anti-slavery convention of American women, an interracial group of 200 women gathered and for the first time called publicly for women's rights. Okay, so at an anti-slavery convention, the first time publicly women called for women's rights. But this alliance would soon break down because white women were using organizing skills that they learned from the abolitionist movements to fight for their own right and our rights alone. But when they convened in 1848 in Seneca Falls Convention, considered the first gathering dedicated exclusively to women's rights in the United States. They did not invite black women. So, we're gonna instead of abolition, we're gonna prioritize women's rights. Blah! Only white women. Do you see why like people are like, screw Susan B. Anthony? Like, you see why? Only one black person was in attendance, a fugitive from slavery named Frederick Douglass. He was largely responsible for the convention's publishing a declaration in support of female suffrage. And yet white women soon abandoned their common struggle with black women specifically, and black people in general. In the aftermath of the Civil War, when black men finally achieved the franchise with the ratification of the 15th Amendment, many white suffragists, such as Susan B. Anthony, were angered that black men got there first. That's our history. But it's only the beginning of the ensuing decades. Suffragist leaders continued to exclude black women from their efforts to gain the vote in a strategy that became known as expediency. This right, so many, and man, there's so many deep dives that I've researched I just haven't done yet. There were so many white women that were like, okay, they're never going to give it to black women, so like, just give it to us. Oh God, this was like expediency, and it didn't expedite anything. This took forever because of white women. The argument, according to historian Paula Giddings, was that including black women in the suffragist effort would make it harder to pass an amendment for women's suffrage, but that once white women got the vote, the franchise for black women would soon follow. This is what they're all trying to say. All, some of them actually were on the right side of history, but a lot of them were not. They were saying this stuff. The old war horses of the suffrage movement, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, did believe in the female franchise as a panacea to the nation's ill. Giddings writes in her book, When and Where I Impact of Black Women on Race and Sex in America, and considers white women a counterbalance to white men and the injustice black Americans experience. But black women consider this naive. Duh. Like, it's like white women are like, no, we know, like, the pick me, like, for some reason we just keep thinking these men care about it. They care about it. They'll protect it. No, they won't. And they also know us, and that we have a history of our own self-interest. Some of the worst abuse, oppression, and exclusion that they experienced came at the hands of white women. So again, this is why we're not trusted. And no one, we don't deserve anyone's trust. We have to earn that. It can be taken away at any moment, the same way men's can. Okay, so I was up until 3 a.m. last night trying to finish that video. A series of events happened, including my account on TikTok almost getting banned because I was had video go viral about marathon running that I did a long time ago, and then my report. So anyway, I was trying to finish this yesterday so hard, and at 3 a.m, I just had to call it quits and said I finished it this morning. And my perfectionism and all kinds of things. I wanted so badly to find this thesis. In the process, I did actually find all these old journals, very insightful. I'm going to go over some of them because, holy crap, I was not as stupid as I thought I was. Anyway, the point being, I don't know. Maybe I brought all my stuff back from the U.S. my last time I went home, and it's in boxes and storage. And I was trying to find my thesis. But, yeah. So maybe I won't ever find it, but I'm so glad I have this article. This article is amazing, and it did such a better job anyway. So I hate that this is so late. I don't know if anybody will even see this, and it'll make any difference because it's like too little too late. Classic. But if this might swing any white women who are not going to vote or who are going to go in there today and be like, maybe rethink that, because we're just repeating our history of doing. That's what we do. Please reconsider. But yeah, again, this may be too late, but this is a history lesson regardless. So Moses awake for this instead of sleeping in the background. Thank you for being here. Oh, look, he's wagging his tail. So what happened? Why did things go so bad? Why did it take this so long? Well, in making the case for their own enfranchisement, some white women urged that giving white women the vote would help maintain white hegemony. Oh God, I forget how to say that word. whatever, I'm not gonna, whatever. In a country experiencing demographic and political change, instead of allying with Black women who shared their oppression as women, they leaned into anti-Black and anti-immigrant sentiment. You know that woman who wrote the yellow wallpaper or whatever, which was I had read that in college in one of my English classes, and I learned so much. And then I found out that woman was doing this. What's her butt? Oh my God, I forget her name. I did a deep dive on her. I researched a deep dive on her, and it's in the 500,000 photos on my phone. So let me know if you want that deep dive, because it's very telling. So many white feminists back then completely abandoned ship and just like, you know what, we're gonna lean real hard into eugenics, white supremacy culture, anti-immigration, anti-Blackness, all of the terrible things to get the vote. And it didn't work. The policy of expediency promised that white women would support Black women once they secured the vote for themselves. Because we're so trustworthy in looking out for Black women, right? But when the 19th Amendment was finally ratified, here we go, most leading white suffragists rebuked pleas from Black women to pressure the federal government to enforce voting rights for Black women in the South, who faced threats and violence at the polls. See, this is another thing that is just skated over in most textbooks, history books, is that even though technically women got the vote with this amendment, Black women in the South, it wasn't until the 60s, like they couldn't vote. I mean, technically, but the South was such a violent, you saw when they were trying to desegregate schools. Oh, you see, I mean, a lot of our like grandmas and grandpas are probably in those photos. You know, a lot of those people are like running the country right now. The ones, and there's a lot of white women who are, if you look at the photos of, around a school, these white women with their children being like, no integration in their minds. That's the environment. So do you really think, so of course, we got what we wanted. So even if white women had gotten the vote first, we wouldn't have done crap. We wouldn't have done anything. Not all. Some may have worked hard. But this is our legacy. And the same way I constantly challenge men to sit with this hard stuff. Face it. Deal with it. Instead of avoiding it, we have to deal with our past. Our consistent past of screwing over all women, but especially Black women. No women are free until all are free, proclaimed a 1921 resolution by a Black suffragist. But for the next 4 decades, Black women fought with little support from white women, facing beatings, bombings, assassinations, before they finally secured their vote with the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And this is why, if you don't learn about this in history, you're like, cool, we got the vote, No, it was not like that. Even after abandoning their Black sisters, white women did not get the full equality they sought. By the 1960s, despite gaining the right to vote, women remained second-class citizens in the United States. Laws and policies enacted by white men allowed women of all races to be openly and legally excluded from jobs, housing, and institutions of higher learning, and they could be prohibited from getting credit cards or loans without a man to co-sign. So even with the vote, we were still, the vote was a big deal, but even with that, in many states, women do not even have the right to turn down schmegs from their husbands, or as spousal rape was legal. And we can thank Lorena Bobbitt as one of the people who changed that. Although when I was a kid watching that on TV, I was like, oh, who's this crazy lady who just cut it off and threw it out the window? Because that's how it was framed. And then when I learned the real story of what happened, good for her. Good for her. Once again, it would be the struggle for Black people's rights that paved the way for white women to achieve theirs. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, listen very well here, okay? So this is yet another example. If white women who follow my page, if you do not care about everyone's freedom, and if you don't care about racism, you need to start caring. Because the only progress we ever have made is when racism was like centered as the biggest issue. And that's another reason why I talk so much about trans rights, because the most vulnerable people in the population, those are the people who need to be centered. Because what happens to them is going to happen to everybody. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. But if you write any comments that are obtuse or turfy or racist or bigoted, you will be banned from ever commenting again. There's like questions. There's questions in good faith. And then there's people just trying to be difficult. And I don't entertain people doing that. My page, my rules. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the most sweeping civil rights law passed since Reconstruction, made it illegal to discriminate against Black Americans in public spaces, education, and employment. But it also became the first federal law, almost as a fluke, to make it illegal to discriminate against women in employment. Now, this part is so fascinating and important. When Congress was deliberating over the bill, a segregationist congressman named Howard Smith, so some big old racist white man, added a protection against gender discrimination in employment, believing that including women as a protected class in the bill would tank it. So this man literally did us a favor by throwing women's rights into a bill, the Civil Rights Act. I love that this man's that him thinking like his little monocle, like evil twisting his things, and actually this was the best thing that happened. Threw it in there hoping that this would kill the bill, right? He inserted the word sex to Title VII of the bill. To the surprise of many, the bill passed anyway. So it was a mistake that women got all these rights. All women, but white women, we only got rights because this white man, who we have in general been so loyal to, was trying to screw everybody. And oh God. We have got to stop thinking men are here to protect us or do anything for us. Decenter men, decenter men, decenter men. Decenter women who center men. Unpack internalized patriarchy, internalized misogyny, your anti-blackness, anti-racist, all of this stuff. We have to. So this first legislative victory for women's rights sneaked in to the back door of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This was not even supposed to happen. We just lucked out. We lucked out. White men do not care about us. In general, they don't care about us. We are way safer in community with Black, Indigenous, and other women of color than we have ever been with white men. That doesn't mean all white men are out to hurt us or whatever, but they have a track record of centering themselves. Just like we have a track record of centering ourselves. But if we were really centering ourselves and what's best for us, we would abandon them and do what's right. So the one word that Smith added changed the course of women's history. That one word, adding the word, changed history. A brilliant Black civil rights lawyer and strategist named Polly Murray had lobbied Congress to include a prohibition of sex discrimination in the 1964 Act. In fighting against racial discrimination, she had faced her share of gender discrimination, and so upon its passage, Murray promoted the idea that women needed to form their own civil rights organization, what she called an NAACP for women. She and other Black women joined with the cadre. Oh my God, y'all! I'm embarrassed. My vocabulary is not great. Maybe it's because I'm learning another language. I don't know. Or maybe I'm just dumb. Anyway, white women activists who, like the suffragists before them, experienced a political awakening while working within the civil rights organization. In 1966, Murray and a biracial group of 49 women founded NOW, the National Organization of Women. This era would mark a catalytic change in the rights of American women, with lawsuits successfully challenging discrimination in employment, in education, and wages, and with women's winning the right to access birth control and abortion, and own their own homes and get their own credit card. We know that this is what really changed things, right? Money. Without access to money and having rights over our own body, and not getting baby trapped by men, or our whole careers and lives derailed by unwanted pregnancy. Like, this stuff is why I'm able to do this right now. Anyway, using the 14th Amendment, which was enacted at the end of slavery to ensure Black American equal protection of the law, activists won a landmark Supreme Court case that recognized women as a protected class. But while some white women, such as Gloria Steinem, worked hard to ensure the movement was inclusive, many other white feminists did not see the need to intertwine the struggle for Black liberation with the struggle for women's liberation, of course. So again, repeating history. By the late 1960s, the women's movement was ascending, even as the civil rights and Black power movements were disintegrating. White-dominated feminist groups failed to endorse Shirley Chisholm, the first woman to run for president in one of the two major political powers in 1972. I don't know about you, but this woman was never brought up in any of my history classes growing up. White women, have you ever heard of her? Maybe younger generations have. She was completely left out of my history books. Now, yeah, I grew up in the South, but I'm just curious. Completely left out. In fact, so left out that when people still think like Hillary Clinton was like the first woman to run for president, you know? Over time, many of the movement's Black founders, such as Pauli Murray, became disillusioned and distanced themselves from mainstream feminist organizations. The attitude of many Black women toward white feminists during the period was summed up by Toni Morrison in her essay for the New York Times, "What do Black women feel about women's liberation? Distrust. It is white, therefore suspect." She went on, "In spite of the fact that liberating movements in the Black world have been catalysts for white feminism," right? Like, we owe our rights to Black movements. Despite all that, too many movements and organizations have made deliberate overtures to enroll Blacks and have ended up by rolling them. Black women, she continued, know that racism is not confined to white men and that there are more white women than men in this country. Again, we are the largest voting bloc, and we are the ones who consistently vote for the wrong side. The side that not only is going to screw everybody, but it even screws us. But we just need to, because we won't unpack our own racism. She recalled that it was white women who were the face of ugly opposition to school and housing integration in the North and South. It wasn't just in the South, by the way. I know I talk a lot about the South because that's where I grew up. But I think a lot of people, you know, like the North is sometimes like the nice guy. Like, well, compared to them, like this is what Europe does too. Compared to the United States, we are so progressive. Okay, but it's still there. It may just not be as obvious. They were both oppressed and oppressor. And I think this is why a lot of white women have a really hard time grasping, is that a lot of us lean into being victims of patriarchy and just victims in general so much that because we think of this binary, you're either good or you're bad. You're either the victim or the oppressor. Well, let me tell you something. That little hobo that I dated, I mean, maybe he made all this up, but I do believe there's cycles of violence. He was, you know, his dad was abusive, tried to unalive his mother in front of him. I feel bad for that child. And then he grew up to be the exact same person. He worse. And so as a white woman, yes, I am a victim of patriarchy. But as a white woman, I am also the bear. And I will try to remember to tag some of my favorite creators. White Woman Whisperer, Delusional Influencer. There's so many amazing creators on TikTok and on YouTube and many platforms who are doing amazing work that if white women followed them, we could really get somewhere. And also support their Patreon so they get paid, especially White Woman Whisperer. She was demonetized because of white women. White women didn't like the idea that we could be the bear also. We like to call men the bear, but we're also the bear in many scenarios. And white women got her demonetized. So please go follow her Patreon. I follow her Patreon and she is just so amazing. She also has a podcast with Knitting Cult Lady too. Anyway, sorry, ADHD. Okay, I'm never going to get through this. Okay. As Elizabeth Gillespie McRae was written in the Times, white women helped knit supremacy into the fabric of their communities. In 1972, according to Giddings' book, just 45% of white women favored efforts to strengthen or change women's status in society, while 62% of black women did. The same poll showed that only 35% of white women sympathized with women's liberation movement. 1972, only a third of women cared about the women's movement, cared about our own rights. What? Compared to 67% of black women. And by the late 1970s, the tide began to turn against women's movements as it had turned against the civil rights movement. White women helped foment the backlash led by the attorney and a Republican activist Phyllis Schlafly. Conservatives coalesced around an opposition to civil rights and feminism. They joined with white men. Here we go again. This is our history. Joined with white men to prevent the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. White women were like, hey, white men. I mean, we see this still all the time, but oh my God, let's get rid of the white women. Which would have enshrined gender equality in the Constitution. So when we had the chance, we were like, no, let's go with the white man. The problem was, after the Roe decision, said activist Nancy Stern, our side went home. And that is why when white women are like, oh my God, Roe v. Wade, abortion. Yes, this is such a critical issue. But do you see why people are frustrated with us? In the 1980s, as American women began to consolidate behind the Democratic Party and its more progressive agenda, white women diverged. White women, like most women, were going towards the Democrats because they're like, I feel like they might have our interests a little bit more, although they got to be pushed. But white women are like, no, I'm going to try to fight against everything good for all women. Because I really want the white man to pick me. That's why I bring this doll out. This is us. Oh my God, pick me. And then we're always like this. In the end, Timing was not coincidental. This was the period when substantial majorities of black Americans and other people of color began to vote Democrat. Many of those voters had immigrated to the United States after a 1965 law eliminated a racist immigration quota system. Sometimes he just stares into space. I think he meditates sometimes. Mose, what are you doing? Are you sleeping that way? Oh. Dog break, dog break, dog break. Dog break, dog break, dog break. Okay. In a 2019 study, they analyzed white women's voting patterns in 2008, 2012, and 2016 elections. The study found that white women's race, more than religious beliefs, income, education, predicted their support for Republican candidates. Outside party affiliations, race specifically identifying as white, is the only variable. This is consistently significant across all three elections, the study concludes. So, they study us. And they're like, this is what y'all do. This is what we do. This is what we do. I hope to God today we Give people a reason to trust us a little more. Then they go into the Clinton race in 2016. Trump, who consistently made misogynistic and racist remarks, ran partly on his promise to overturn women's 50-year constitutional right to abortions. It was, again, considered one of the greatest and most important victories of the women's liberation movement was the abortion issue. Clinton vowed to protect that right, and many pundits predicted that Clinton would overperform among women. But white women did what we do, and she did overperform. Some 54% of all women voted for Clinton. 41% of men did. The largest gender gap in presidential elections in more than 35 years. So, more than half of all women showed up, but a majority of white women did not vote for Clinton. In real numbers, more white women voted for Trump than white men. Let that sink in. More white women voted for Trump than white men. So every time we try to blame men for what is happening right now, it was white women who did this. If you didn't vote for Trump, okay, I didn't. But collectively, we are not trustworthy. We're not. Had white women voted like other women, the gender barrier to the nation's highest office would have been broken and Donald Trump would not have become president. In 2024, because of the Trump presidency, many women for the first time find themselves living in a country where abortion is illegal. We have women literally dying in their cars, dying from miscarriages, dying all over the place. That's on our people. Seeing stories now of women, even those who wanted their pregnancies, bleeding out, dying, nearly dying, or losing their ability to ever have children. Infant mortality rates have risen since Roe was overturned and millions of women lost abortion access. Because of the Trump's presidency, many Black Americans, for the first time in their lives, find themselves living in a country where affirmative action is illegal, leading to the elimination of race-conscious policies across American institutions that were born of the civil rights movement, leaving many fearing that already gaping racial opportunity gaps will get way worse. So again, we are literally turning things back because of our refusal to do what we need to do when asked to do it. It is not incidental that the reversal of women's rights has coincided with the backlash against Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. The rollback in civil rights for Black Americans and the conservative anti-diversity crusades, the woke, and they're like, it's all dog whistles. They just say like woke or, God, I can't think of the other ones. There's so many. It's like, exactly what they're saying. They just hide it behind those words. Historical patterns suggest that just as Black women are vital to Black movements, sorry, I'm like really struggling to read this. Y'all, maybe I should pull out my granny glasses. Hold on. Okay, here we go, y'all. Perimenopause in full effect here. Oh, this is so much better. The whole time I was like, just as Black women are vital to Black movements, so Black movements are vital to the progress of feminist movements. So all the time in my comments, white women will come in and be like, not everything's about white supremacy. Why are you talking about white blah, 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 blah? Because it's like makes them feel bad. This right here. I mean, besides just like we should care. This right here. When we don't care, nothing happens. When we care about civil rights, and especially Black movements, everyone benefits from that. When we don't care, we go nowhere. We have to deal with this stuff. Just as hold on. Okay. Dealing with trauma from family and dealing with my past and my own personal healing is a critical part of my journey. This stuff is critical too. Because if I do just this stuff and then I don't deal with my codependency and my healing stuff, I'm actually going to be dangerous in any movements. because I'm going to project all of, like, I'm going to be so triggered because of my past that I don't understand. And so, and the same thing goes, if I deal with my past and my codependency, but I don't learn about this stuff, I'm also dangerous. I have to be deconstructing, like, collectively this indoctrination and my own personal stuff. That to me has been life-changing, is to deal with the whiteness, white supremacy. When I say whiteness, a lot of people don't know what I'm talking about. It is just like the thing that was created. The thing that was created, especially in the New World, especially in the United States, that is all about white supremacy culture. When I started to deconstruct all at the same time, first I was doing this stuff, and then didn't know how much healing I had to do. And so I got stuck. So then I focused on my healing, and then I was like, but it feels empty without this. So I'm trying to do both at the same time. And I encourage anybody who really wants to feel liberated and not be this person that you don't want to be, focus on both. Feminism has always had the greatest currency in times of Black militancy or immediately thereafter. Conversely, new gains for women, hold on. Oh, there we go. New gains for women become more difficult to attain when Black issues are not high on the national agenda or the national consciousness. In 2020, the common refrain was that Black women who organized and helped turn key states such as Georgia in the presidential election, ensured democratic control of the Senate, saved democracy. Now white women are being called to do the same. In an election where the failure to support a Black woman could usher in the second presidency of a man who is threatening to jail his opponents and put millions of people in camps before deporting them, and who a former chairman of Mark warned us is a fastest, the most dangerous person in the country. Some are taking up the call. Hey, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to wrap this up. We are the largest single voting bloc, and yet many of these women, a majority of these women in recent presidential elections, have voted in a way that upholds white supremacy and that upholds patriarchy. Will white women change a pattern of individualism, self-interest, which is even self-interest in the end, start showing up and being trusted? Will we? I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, I'm sure I lost a lot of followers from this, but that's okay. I don't really want people following me if they don't want to deal with this. I know I do a lot of content that's I try to infuse what I've learned in my content about dating and TV and film and all that stuff. But if you want more like history videos, I'm happy to do it. I'm not a historian. And there are people who are better at that, but I don't know. I will if you want. Let me know. Oh God, let me know if you want more kind of like history kind of videos. But because I have so much content I want to make, but also I can't wait to share some of the stuff that really I think will actually help people deal with DV and stuff. Anyway, very long-winded video. Take care of yourselves today. Good luck. I know times seem like very gloomy and like hopeless, but they're not. When you look at history, this is not that crazy. So, it may feel that way. It feels that way, but it's been worse. It's been worse. So, yeah. Take care of yourselves. Go out into your community. I've tried to really be focused more on my community than, I used to protest and stuff, Occupy Wall Street, all that stuff. That stuff's important. But anyway, like talking to my family, I've been trying to really focus on the one-on-one in ways that I think I can actually make a big difference, in addition to having a platform and stuff. Anyway, community building, long game, local elections, the election is just one day. It's important, but this is just where things begin. Oh God. Oh my God. Sorry. Anyway, and let me know if you heard the comment song. Take care, y'all. Sleeping dog comment song, sleeping dog comment song. Sorry, I have to do a quick song because this has to be under an hour. Sleeping dog comment song, sleeping dog comment song. I hope you take care today. Take care today. Thanks for watching.